Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris Mooneyham from 680 The Fan, and of course from the Touchdown Club of Atlanta. And thanks for joining us for this week's edition of My Take. Yeah, thanks for coming back around, everybody, this week as we now make our way into the Sweet 16 of the Georgia High School football playoffs. 1A, public and private, both join the party this week. They, of course, with only 16-team playoffs in 1A public and private. And, of course, classifications 2A through 6A have whittled their field down last week, the opening round of the state playoffs, this week, the Sweet 16. I'm not going to spend as much time this week griping and complaining as I have in the past about the layout of the Georgia high school football brackets. I'll give you a brief version because I suppose I should give some backstory for those of you maybe just catching our blog for the first time, or maybe you don't follow Georgia high school football religiously or Georgia high school athletics. During the season or before the season, the governing body at the GHSA randomly selects the regions that will play each other inside of the Georgia high school football state playoffs. They'll just say, Region 1 will play Region 4 this year, which means that the 4 teams from Region 1 and the 4 teams from Region 4 will all play each other. Okay, that sounds simple. But the thing about it is it can be completely random to the point where, unfortunately, many times in the opening round of the state playoffs, you will have maybe the second best region playing the fourth best region. And remember, there are 8 regions in the state of Georgia. So inevitably, what ends up happening is you have matchups in the first couple of rounds between teams that, deserve a better fate and should be able to put together more of a run deeper into the playoffs. But because of the random nature of the laying out of the brackets, that's not always the case. Not only do we see that in the first round, but really more so, we see it in the second round. Matchups in the second round, not just between 2 evenly matched teams, but sometimes we have matchups in the Sweet 16 of the Georgia high school football playoffs that are state championship game worthy. Now, I will say, I don't know that we have as many here in 2015 as we've had in the past. I remember a few years ago, we had one in every classification where you could legitimately say that these 2 teams meeting in these games in each classification in the Sweet 16, were state championship caliber matchups. We don't have as many this year, but we still do have some. Let's start in 6A. And of course, the doozy of them all that trumps all of them throughout the state is Archer versus McEachern. Archer versus McEachern, easily 2 of the preseason favorites to win the state championship. That game going to be over at Cantrell in Powder Springs. And having said that, by the way, the winner doesn't necessarily move on to the state semifinals because the winner gets Mill Creek. The winner gets Mill Creek in the Elite 8. That is absolutely the group of death down on the bottom right-hand corner of your 6A bracket. Camden County also takes on Roswell on the very top left corner of your 6A bracket. That is a matchup, quite frankly, of championship proportions. A lot of people don't know as much about Roswell this year, even though they've seen the record and they think maybe it's hollow. I got news for you. Roswell absolutely is a state championship contender. Really, really good defense, maybe the 3rd or 4th in the classification, 3rd or 4th best in the classification, and maybe 2nd or 3rd best offense in the classification as well. They may be on a collision course with Grayson coming in the state semifinals. The 5A classification doesn't have as many matchups like that this year, partly because there was a little bit of attrition in the opening round. Northside Warner Robins, the defending state champions, were knocked out of the playoffs. If they had won and Stevenson had not lost to Rome, the Northside Warner Robins and Stevenson would have faced each other. How great would that matchup have been? And then on the top side, you would have had Drew with one of the great offenses in 5A taking on South Paulding, but I digress. The point being, there's a lot of attrition, a lot of teams losing in the 5A classification, so we don't have as many matchups like that as we are accustomed to. In fact, really, Lanier and Northgate may be the top matchup in 5A in the Sweet 16. 4A, Marist and Mary Persons. That's my vote. I mean, either one of those teams could win their next couple of ball games, even though it would be against Woodward or Spalding coming up. That might be the other big-time matchup because the Jaguars of Spalding are for real. Now think about that. The four teams that are left in the top left corner of the 4A bracket, just in that one quad, Spalding, Woodward Academy, Marist, and Mary Persons. That's unbelievable. Any of those four teams could come out of that quad and be a Final Four participant. Yeah, I think that's probably it for 4A. We move on to 3A. Elbert County, Dodge County, that's a good one, but I don't think it's the number one. Peach County and Calhoun, that's closer to being number one inside of that classification, but I won't even vote for that one. In fact, I'm going to go with Oconee County and Cedar Grove. Now, Cedar Grove, everybody knows about, most people know about, a talent-laden program that's been in the top five for the majority of the year this year. I was on the Cedar Grove bandwagon. I trumpeted, well, not the bandwagon, I led the bandwagon on Cedar Grove a couple of years ago, telling everybody this is a team that's coming up to surprise some folks. They'll be a state championship contender come 2015. Another team that I trumpeted highly coming into this season, a little bit last year, but mainly coming into 15, was Oconee County. I don't mean to brag. I will, though, brag just a little bit because I'll be the first guy to blast myself when I'm wrong. But I knew Oconee County was going to be good. I didn't know if they could win the region championship over Elbert County and Jefferson, but I knew they'd be very, very good nonetheless. They did end up winning that region championship, and it's really unfortunate that Oconee County and Cedar Grove, one of those two teams, is going to be knocked out come the end of play next weekend. Because I got news for you. Whoever wins that ball game, I believe, has the inside track at reaching the state championship game in the 3A classification. 2A does not really have that high-level marquee matchup that we're accustomed to seeing, especially in the 2A classification. Lovett's been hot as of late. Second half of the year, they take on the defending state champs in Benedictine. Jefferson County takes on Wesleyan. Watch out. Wesleyan can absolutely win that game, although Jefferson might be better than them. Jefferson County is surprising some folks this year. Pace versus Screven, that's a really good matchup. Macon County versus Bowden, also very good. 2A, very balanced. A lot of really, really good matchups, even if no high-level state championship marquee matchup in the Sweet 16. The Elite 8 this year is going to be absolutely crazy, going to be chocked full of those potential state championship matchups. We'll see a lot more of what I'm focused on this week come the Elite 8 next weekend. Until next weekend, I'm Chris Mooneyham. Thanks for joining us for this week's edition of My Take.